All right, so
That's
good. All right, this is the price right and present your CMA portion of it tonight. This is where you establish either a good relationship or a bad relationship with your seller, in my opinion.
I think it's one of the most important pieces.
And it absolutely is. And the reason that is we all know if you have a price of property that sits on the market, and you have to have those weekly phone calls with your seller wondering why people are not viewing their property. So this is a huge portion. It's one of the critical components as far as listing property goes. So we'll kick up. We'll do a quick checkpoint on the daily 10-4. How's everybody doing with their daily 10-4? Do we have any lead generators in the room that are doing a daily 10-4, or if you're not doing it, what might be getting in the way that help with?
Tina's getting back in.
Getting back in?
She was downstairs, so.
Yeah. Gotta have time for that, Kate.
Well, in the week that we did, like last week, I did really well because we had, me, Dee Dee, and Sandra.
They established some accountability partnerships.
But then that kind of falls
them
off.
up. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like
So y'all
it's,
just, maybe you need to keep it back up.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to get them on the fan.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's accountability. That's what it's all about.
I did do some, I didn't do it.
She sent me an email while she was gone and said that she had been still been doing some things while she was all the way across the country, in Seattle. So.
Well, good. We just gotta always keep in mind that that's the most important component of our business is finding that business.
I got this.
While she was gone.
Excellent. Good. Great news. Did you price it right? Present your CMA correct.
We're gonna find out.
No, I did close. It was interesting.
Today I'm going to stick to the meat of this Ignite course, and I'm going to gloss over some of the stuff that's repetitious from the first sessions and just jump right in. So I'm going to jump right in on page 15.4 and get your head in the game. And we're going to start off with the first paragraph. Beginning in Power Session 1, Rev Up, you've been learning the dominant role your mindset plays in success in real estate sales. Pricing also has a large mindset component, both for you and your seller. First part of your job in pricing is to get into the heads of buyers and sellers so you understand and empathize what both are thinking. So take just a couple minutes and read the paragraph from Tony Casello and highlight or underline anything that stands out in that paragraph, and let's discuss that. So take about 3 minutes to read that over. And then we'll fix the clock.
And the triple A logo.
This ticket again, it's just not that. Good. Anybody got any ahas from the paragraph? Anything that jumps out at you?
like well, it's so true. Sellers and buyers are typically out of sync with realities of the market, whichever market they may be. They always are typically almost 99.9% of the time.
Well, when he said, and he talks about it, he says, sellers want to push prices up and buyers want to hold the line, and then when the market shifts, buyers want to push prices down and sellers want to hold the line. And so then it says the net result is a gap between a buyer and seller's perception of what a home is currently worth, and your job is to close that gap.
That's right.
I like that.
Yeah.
You see that these rate that will often provide, they want to bring the price down, when I get in. Want to bring the price down, and the sellers say no, I was saying.
Yeah, they're always trying to change the market back in their favor, so they won't be on the leading edge of shifting back into whichever market it is.
Person like that now.
Mhm. Absolutely. So what happens when you do price a property right and it stays on the market for a short period of time and you get a lot of activity? What it tells us over here in the left-hand margin, it's a win. It's a win for you because you win the seller's agreement on a list price for their property that will get it sold and generate income for the business. And it's a win for your customers because they get a sale of their home for the most money possible in the least amount of time. And that's the critical component to pricing right. As we get through, we're going to see a couple of graphs that really illustrate the importance of pricing your property correctly to begin with. I also have one of the examples from the comps I pulled of a house that was not, in my opinion, priced properly, and in the market's opinion, because it stayed on the market for a very long time, went off for 60 days, came back on the correct price, and they got set in 12 days. So it really is, the key component of this is just to set yourself up for success, yourself and the seller up for success. And oftentimes, probably 50% of the time or more, the seller is going to think that their property is probably worth more than what you're going to tell them the market is bringing for the property.
We talked a little bit about that yesterday, about that people's emotions get tied into that too.
They do. They do, and it's really tough. And we'll talk about some scripts and some strategies about how you can get past that objection, because that's one of the biggest objections you face when you're listing properties is pricing. It's probably the biggest opportunity to win your client in the beginning. And so we'll get into there. So today's plan of action is we're going to study the fundamentals of how markets work, discover the top pricing strategies to guide you when you price any property, learn to prepare a comparative market analysis, learn scripts to present price and handle pricing objections, and discover standards and techniques that will help you deliver a great presentation of your CMA and your price recommendation. Some of the items you'll need to complete today's exercise is the E-Edge listing consultation pages. Does everybody know where to find that? Your listing presentation.
Yeah.
It is prepared for you. It is there within your E-Edge control panel. I can take a minute to walk through that if you need to see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that what we never showed?
I don't know.
The pre-listing packet is right there in that same.
Okay.
Okay.
If you went through how to get to the pre-listing
Yeah.
packet, then the listing presentation is directly adjacent to that.
Okay, it's right beside it.
Right, and it's going to contain some of these graphs that we're going to look at that talk about pricing your property out in the market and when you should have the most activity and those sorts of things. So it's a template put together for you, but I would encourage you to go in there and adjust it to make it your own. Make it suit you, because there may be things in there that, like a 14-step marketing strategy, and one of those pieces you may not employ. So you want to make sure that it's customized. It's every page when it's fully customizable. You just go in there and make it fit whatever your guidelines are and go with that. I'm going to provide you with the property to price and comparable properties data. So I know you've got it. You've got it. Earl, you can tell me this information. And I will bring it. So these keep separate from that. Okay.
Thank you.
So on page 15.6, can somebody read that, make it have the pricing overview art and science?
Understanding the mindsets of buyers and sellers is important. However, the psychology of markets, what sellers and buyers are thinking about the market, is just one dimension of pricing. As Schiff points out, pricing is a bit like a famous game show that Price is Right. Sellers want it to go as high as they think they can without losing the sale, and buyers want to go as low as they can without losing the chance to buy what they want. What buyers and sellers hope for plays a role, but hope is not a strategy. The good news is that pricing is also a process. So also requires knowing pricing strategies based on the principles that drive markets. It also requires knowing pricing tactics, comparative market analysis, building, and presenting, and scripts that come with it. Pricing is one of the very few absolutely essential real estate success skills. To becoming a pricing expert, you must know how markets work, local market conditions, and pricing criteria, and how to apply them.
Yes. And over on the left-hand column, we have a couple of boxes there. The truth: pricing is a competitive skill. Be better at it than other agents consistently, and you'll win more listings and more sales. And I'd like to add a little bit onto that, because pricing is a competitive skill, and oftentimes what you find is if you are the second agent in line, you may have a different opinion of the price than the first agent does. And then what's the next tool you need to have ready when that happens?
Yes.
You've got to have your scripts in place, because you're going to have agents and they're going to do what I call buy a listing. They're going to list it at whatever the seller wants to list it at, because they want the listing so bad they won't have it in their inventory. I don't encourage taking over price listings. Some people do. I don't believe in it. In fact, if somebody wants to list a property where I think I can't sell it, then I don't think it's going to be a win for me or for them if I take it at that price.
Well, you're going to spend money.
You're going to spend money. You're going to spend time. You're going to begin on the wrong foot. That's what I was saying earlier. That's why it's such a critical component. It's because if you start off on the wrong foot, and after week 2 you haven't had a single showing, and the seller's calling, why isn't anybody looking at my house? Well, if you had teed that up properly and you set that up and said, I believe we're overpriced, then you could ask them for adjustment at that point. Again, I don't believe in taking over price listings. I think you just tell them, I don't think we're going to get any showings, then they can go put it on the market with somebody else, and after 90 days when they're through complaining with that agent, they're going to come back to you and go, wish I'd listened to you to start with. Let's put my house on the market at the right price. So anyway, having the scripts and the objection handlers is huge. It's really huge. About how, because like I said, oftentimes you're going to go in and somebody's going to say, hey, this person told me my house is worth $15,000 more. And then how do you handle that? It's going to be really, really important. A comparative market analysis is simply a process by which a property is to be priced. To be priced is evaluated against other comparable properties, recent pending sales and active listings to determine a recommended list price. There is no magic CMA. There is no format that's one standard format. Innovia does provide a format for you. You can create your own. It just simply is a set of, and we'll get into more detail, but really it's just that. It's recent and pendings and actives, because when you go on the market, you're entering your competition essentially, and that's what your seller needs to know. If there are active houses that are on the same block that are within 50 square feet, built, like our market is a lot of, they're built within a couple of years of each other, then it's really going to come down to staging and pricing. Which house shows the best and which house is priced most competitively, because you are entering competition. And the sellers need to know that. So sellers also need to know how markets work. What drives markets? Is it a buyer's market? Is it a seller's market? And is that shifting? And which way is it shifting if it is in the middle of the shift? So 2 principles about markets and value provide a great foundation for pricing any real estate. Markets operate on the law of supply and demand. When supply is high and demand is down, prices fall. When supply is low and demand is up, prices increase. Difference between a buyer and seller market. Value is established based on an agreement between a willing seller and a willing buyer. A tug of war is always between what the seller wants and the buyer is willing to pay. And really, it's all about the fair market value. A house really is worth what a buyer's willing to pay for it. As a listing agent, it's your job to help them understand the reality of the market as well. And you're going to run into challenges with that because you're going to have buyer agents that bring you offers that are a lot of times below what the market value of the house is based on the comparable sold. So when that happens, what would be a good strategy to help educate the buyer in that instance?
Say that sentence again.
So you have oftentimes when you're listing that, you will have a buyer's agent that brings you an offer because buyers are in that mentality that, hey, I can buy things for pennies on the dollar still, so they bring you an offer that's $20,000 a month. And you've done your homework up front, you've priced the property correctly when you put it on the market based on current actives and recent sales and pendings. What could you do in that instance to help a win-win agreement between the buyer and seller?
First of all, you thank the other agent for an offer.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, I work real hard on a market analysis of this house, and I believe with all my heart it's priced right.
Mm-hmm.
But let's make it a win-win and get to a point where your buyer and my seller is willing to stop negotiating, and then we got a contract.
Right. I think that's excellent.
Can you show me how you came up with your price?
That would be my second step.
Yeah.
If I were willing to share with you how I came up with the price where we listed, would you be willing to share with me your comparables that support the value of the offer you're approving?
Yeah. That's the second step.
That's the second step.
Okay.
And then sometimes that will help you close that gap.
The whole goal as agents is to get those two folks together
That's right.
and make it a win-win.
That's right. You have a
So
seller
whatever
that
you
wants to
have
sell,
to do,
and you have a buyer that wants to buy, and you got to make it agree.
whatever you have to do,
That's right.
just be always kind.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. Just keep both the parties' best interest in mind.
That's what
If you're representing the seller, it is in the buyer's best interest if they got a low ball offer. Maybe they go around and make 15 offers, but really if it's the house they want, then you help them realize that it's a fair market price and people are usually willing to pay a fair market value for a house. Unless it's an investor, then they're just going to bounce around 15 times until they get a house for pennies on the dollar. And if that's the case, then that's the case. It's not a win for your seller. It's a win-win. A win-lose doesn't work in either direction. So, to price accurately and price to sell, you must constantly study conditions of your local market and the specific neighborhoods where you want to specialize. Here's some basic factors to watch. Inventory. Is it increasing or decreasing? Days on the market, is that increasing or decreasing? Price per square foot. A good comparative indicator of prices when a group of properties has common qualities and features. That can easily be applied in neighborhoods where builders have gone in and built a couple of hundred houses within 5 years. You can really look at price per square foot a lot. Now, if you're in a neighborhood like Lindale that's been built over 30 years and there's all different sizes and custom built, then it becomes a little bit harder. So I would just caution on that price per square foot. The key there is when a group of properties have common qualities and features. Be careful not to get wrapped up in cost per square foot when you have apples and oranges, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Changes in the local landscape. Monitor changes in shopping, schools, and other services in the community, and changes in local law for impact housing. A buyer's market is a market which has more sellers than buyers. Lower prices result from this excess supply over demand. Anytime you have a glut of inventory, your prices are going to go down. The opposite is true with the seller's market. Moving sellers and buyers' pricing from psychology and emotion into a fact-based playing field is your challenge as an agent. It's their biggest purchase or their biggest sale where they want to net the most money so they can go to their next purchase or retire or downsize, whatever it is they're trying to do. So it's up to us to really educate them and help them understand that it needs to be a win-win. So what are the factors that drive pricing? And which ones can you change? You've got location, which you can't change. You've got size, which you can change, but not easily. Amenities and condition. That's the 4 factors that you've got. And 2 of those are not easy. One of them you can't change, and one is expensive to change. So the things you really want to focus on when you're either when you're pricing, or if a seller's stuck on a certain price, yet their amenities don't dictate that price, or the condition doesn't dictate that price, then it either becomes, all right, you've got to lower the price to match the condition, or you've got to raise the condition to match the asking price. The key is price fixes any problem in real estate. There is no problem that you can't fix. So, we're going to look at the pricing based on the comparables that I provided there. So we're going to skip that stop and do section. The tip on the side, though, is pretty important. Top listing agents understand the importance of scarcity, which is a refinement of all the criteria. Properties with unique characteristics may be very difficult to find comparables for anywhere in the area, and their value will increase as a result. I like to say, since they, positively unique characteristics will make it increase as a result. Now, where's an example where unique characteristics may make the price not go up, but rather go down? There could be unique characteristics that are negative.
Sure, yeah, like purple shutters.
Yeah, exactly.
Like what is-
I mean, we've all seen houses in the market that are 3,600 square feet and are on the market for 130.
Yeah.
I mean, it's because they're very, very unique. They may have tiny rooms, or they may have, they just got some weird features that your typical buyer doesn't like. So,
The other thing about you're talking about sellers in their houses. The other thing about sellers in their houses, if it's a house on the market in a neighborhood where the new construction is still going on, you got a situation. Because a lot of times they might have paid the price in 2006 for big money. Today, it might be worth $20,000 less.
that's right.
Like I did one of those yesterday.
That happens, especially in those neighborhoods that
So-
had a lot going on during that time, and then stopped for 2 years. And now the builder's back on again.
No, I'll just ask you this question. When you have a buyer that likes a house in that neighborhood, I feel like you have to share the fact that, this is the top of the market right now that these builders are selling in. This price, I want you to be aware that it could change. When they go up, your house may not still be a reasonable deal. It may go down. So, do you do that? Do you make them aware of the possibility with the new construction continuing to go on?
Well,
There's not that much difference in the price of a new construction and their house.
Yes, I would make them aware of that.
I thought so. But that's important.
Absolutely. Well, because it gives them another option. They may just want to buy one of the new ones
Right.
for a few,
Make it unique.
yeah, make it their own.
Yeah.
So it's something to really think about.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, because yesterday I dealt with a guy who was building, had bought a house in Davenport in 2011. Well, he paid $172,900. A brand new one with more square footage was $188,000. Who wouldn't pay the difference to get something 500 square foot bigger and newer? And I had the same position to tell him, in my opinion, his house was only worth $163,000. And I was the third person. He said, well, that's what the second agent told me just this afternoon.
Mhm.
So, at least there are other agents out there that know that price of house.
Right. Yeah.
And it was right.
Mm-hmm.
The variables were there, and he understood it.
Yeah.
It hurt his heart when he didn't realize he wasn't gonna get his money back. He'd been on the market a year for what he paid for it.
Yeah.
Sad, but anyway, that's why.
It is, and shifting markets, unfortunately, sellers are subject to those shifting markets. And, you know, we just went through a down cycle, and a lot of them are going to be feeling those effects for quite some time.
Absolutely. It's just to let those of you who know, who haven't been around the market a while, that's an important thing to share with everybody.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You are working with them, so you do. That's fact of what happens.
Absolutely.
Why do you see much? But anyway.
No question. Absolutely. So it's very important to grasp the 6 critical strategies that set the stage for using pricing criteria effectively. These strategies are standards you need to bear in mind as you approach pricing any property. With practice, you absorb and internalize them. They will become part of you as a real estate agent and make you an outstanding advisor to both buyers and sellers, which that's really what our job is to advise them. They make the decision, we educate them to make a good decision. So, and here's this number 1 is just perfect. There's little point in winning a listing if it doesn't sell.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
To get a home sold for the most money in the least amount of time, it must be priced in the market. There are 2 determining factors, and that's price and condition. There's also size and location. They're using price and condition because those are the 2 that are easy to change. And that's one thing you always tell yourself. There's 4 factors that we just went over that dictate the price, or things that you can change. Price and condition you can change very easily. So to sell a competitively priced property, you must also present itself to buyers in the best possible condition outside and inside the home. That's huge. You know, you have some sellers that are just, they're gung-ho, they're going around, they're making everything look perfect, and then you have some that say, I don't want to do anything. You know, they can see.
They've already checked out their house.
They're done. You know, they've got a green room for one child, a pink room for the other, and a purple living room, and you're going, look, you know, if we want to sell this house, you really need to paint everything neutral. Look, a can of paint's $20. The buyer can do that. Well, what you got to do is educate them that buyers want to back your truck up and they want to unload furniture. They don't want to buy a house, paint, then move in furniture. And that's the reality of the situation. That's part of our job with
And the landscaping in particular.
the landscaping. It's
You
huge.
can't, some people won't go in a house, and the landscape is
Just true.
Well,
Yeah.
that's a huge thing that's another thing.
Curb appeal.
Curb appeal is
Yeah.
important.
It's huge. Huge, huge, huge.
First impression.
This graph that's down at the bottom of page 15.9, that is actually part of our listing package in eEdge.
Yeah.
There's several graphs in there. This is one of them. This is a great one, price versus comps, and you've got in the market, and you've got no man's land and out of the market. So, and then the left side is price versus comps. So if you're within 33% of your comps, you're in the market. I would narrow that down a little bit, and I would say you need to probably be within 10% in the market we're in currently. Same thing with condition. Condition, there's a little more leeway than there is with pricing because there are some buyers that can see past a few things. Most don't, but there are some that can. So it's not quite as critical. However, I would advise you to make your sellers believe that it's one of the most critical things, because it is, if you want to appeal to a broad range of people. You can appeal to a narrow range with a property that's not in great condition, but usually you're appealing to an investor or somebody looking for sweat equity, and then that in turn is going to result in what? A low offer. And that's how we need to educate our sellers. So the second most critical thing is knowing what the seller can and cannot control. And we talk about that. They can control the price and the condition. They can control the size, but they can't do it easily, and the location is what it is. So this chart down here, this is also in your EDGE package, is pricing misconceptions. These things do not matter when it comes to pricing the house. And this is a hard discussion to have, but it's one that you must have if you have a seller that wants to be a little bit out of line with pricing. What you paid for it makes absolutely no difference. What you need to get out of it makes absolutely no difference. What you want to get out of it makes absolutely no difference. What your neighbor says it's worth, what another agent says it's worth, and the cost to rebuild today. None of those have any factor whatsoever. What dictates the price is what the market is bringing for a similar property. That's it. That's absolute. That will not change. And we talk about what another agent says. You have to be careful of agents that want to buy listings, and you need to really have good scripts for that. And that's one that you cannot always overcome. I know from experience. I've had them bought out from under me before. And then, of course, you get the call later, and they say, "Boy, I wish I'd listened to you to start with." And I go, "Well, I wish you would have too, because we would have had you sold in Tennessee by now."
And on 59 at the very bottom, on the right-hand side, the rest of the properties, they help others listing sell. If you overprice your listing, you're helping other listings sell.
Absolutely.
That's very important.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
to me, when you say that to a seller, they're going to say, "Well, what are you talking about?"
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I missed that too. And that's one of the scripts that you use. Do you want to be the property that causes your neighbor's house to sell?
That's better said than this.
Or do you want to be the one that the buyer's interested in? And that's a part of a lot of, if you're getting a lot of activity and you're not getting an offer, then there's a reason for that. The market's telling you a story. And that's what you need to tell yourself. We're getting a lot of activity. However, your house hasn't gone under contract, but 3 others in the neighborhood have. So what's the market telling us? That we're priced out of the market, and we're selling other properties. We're having to sell other properties. So there's a script on page 1510. Would somebody like to read that script? It's at the top right above the pricing misconceptions.
Mr. and Mrs. Seller, some of the things you can control during the selling process are the conditions of your property, the availability of your home for showing, and your position in the market. In the end, value is determined solely by what a buyer is willing to pay in today's market. Based on comparing your home to others currently on the market for sale, I don't determine value, and neither do you. The market determines value. Does this make sense?
I think it's a great script. I love the you can control your positioning in the market. That's a much more subtle way of saying you want too much for your house. You don't have to inject that price, because when you start, the word price, people, for whatever reason, sometimes that gets them. So if you use positioning in the market, how do you want to position yourself in this market? That's another way of it becoming us versus them, because you're on your seller's team. So how do we position ourselves in the market? It becomes you against the market, and not you against yourself fighting for a price. And I think that's one of the critical components, is that you need to establish that with your seller, is that you're on their team and it's us against the market. It's never, you don't ever want it to be the agent against the seller trying to close a gap on price. You want it to be us against the market.
Well, CMA, when Diana did that one in bold, and she does that whole presentation, and she basically gets the buyer to come to her.
Yes.
And it's amazing, because she puts it out there and she lets him answer all the questions. And it's,
She's really good at that.
she's so good at it, and that's like, I can't wait for you to see that when you go. Like, it's pretty, it's a really, that's probably one of my favorite things I saw involved, was her getting him to that. Like, he did it himself,
Right.
and she brought him there.
Right.
She just kind of led him that way, and he.
The script does a lot of that.
Mhm.
You know, it helps you establish it's us against the market. It's because when you're doing this, you're not just doing this script without, this script goes along with what you're presenting to the seller. So, you know, at the end, you would say, based on the comparables that we've looked at today, and based on your active competition, how do you want to position yourself in this market? And you let them make the decision. And then if they come up and they say 185 and your highest comp's 179, then you say, well, help me understand, you know, based on what we've seen today, help me understand where your 185 is coming from. And it becomes a series of, like you said, asking a lot of questions rather than saying, this is where your house needs to be priced.
One other thing is, when you say we're pricing your house, or we're talking about your house price against the market.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say market, then I ask them, do you know who you're marketing to?
Mm-hmm.
And if they look at you like lost your mind, but they need to understand the buyers are the ones
Mm-hmm.
that set the price, the value. So they need to understand that the market is the buyer.
That's right. That's right.
And that gets it, to me, that gets it closer to reality
Yes.
instead of
Yes.
market. You know, those buyers back there,
Yeah.
they
That's
set
right.
that market.
Those people out there. Out there. On 1511, there's a great graphic here, which I think is one of the most powerful ones that's in this package. It's the activity level versus weeks on market, and what the industry as a whole should see if you're priced competitively. And people digest graphics a whole lot better than they digest you sitting there telling them what you think a price is, you know, could or should or needs to be. You've got your activity level on the left hand, which is up and down, and the weeks on market goes right to left, and when most offers are received are weeks 4 through 6. So what you need, this becomes really critical when you're talking about the market and saying those buyers out there. Because what you want to say is this graph represents where we should be after 21 days on the market. And I like to tell myself, if we haven't had 3 showings in the first 3 weeks, then the market is telling us a story. And as long as we listen to that story and make an adjustment, we're going to be able to get your house sold. But it's critical that we listen to what the market is telling us in those first 3 weeks, because as a whole, you can see based on this graph that most offers are received weeks 4 through 6. So if we haven't had 3 showings, then we need to get positioned more competitively in the market so we can position ourselves to receive an offer when the next person walks through this door. Because right now we're not getting people to walk through the door. And again, there's 2 things that control that. It can be condition or it can be the price. And price fixes the condition. So if the conditions keep them out, keeping offers away, then you adjust accordingly. So understanding the window of opportunity is what this says. New listings get on the radar of active buyer agents and online consumers quickly. Poorly priced listings, even new ones, fall off those same radar screens with amazing speed. That's where this graph is so important. If you're priced out of the market, you're not getting any activity, then what happens to the market? Then what's the perception in the market?
It's not good. It's not
Something wrong. Prices to find something wrong.
Yeah. How many times have you worked with a buyer and they say, well, gosh, that house has been on the market 80 days. What's wrong with that house?
Is that you?
Yeah. I mean, that's one of their first questions. What's wrong with the house? So it stigmatizes the property. You need to make sure that your sellers understand that. Because your seller doesn't work with buyers every day. They don't know this information. That's why these graphs are so important, and us letting them know that, hey, you know, my experience with buyers are if we start looking at houses that have been on the market over 60 days, they want to know what's wrong with the house. So it's very important that we have you competitive to begin with. It really is critical. I mean, I'm guilty of it. I've taken some with the seller that I knew was going to be a little difficult to get priced accordingly, and I'll do it anyway, and then I'll end up with a house that I can't sell, and the seller is unhappy and thinks I'm not doing my job. And that's going to hurt you in the long run because our business is really, really based on referrals and happy sellers. I mean, it is so critical that you price the house right to start with and get the condition where it needs to be. Just crucial. So I would put a big circle around this graph right here. I think this is the most powerful graph in this whole power session right here. It's huge. The next great graph is on the next page, 1512, and it's the triangle that shows percentage of potential buyers who will look at the property. So the bottom is a massive amount of buyers, and the top of the triangle represents nobody. So if you're 15%, look, if you're 90% of market value, you're going to have everybody looking at the house. Probably going to end up with multiple offers. Same at 75%. If you're going to have 90% of the buyers looking at it, I said that wrong. If you're 15% below market value, you're going to have 90% of all buyers looking at the house. And that triangle just works its way right up. The sweet spot is there at market value, where you're going to get the seller the most amount of money in the least amount of time by exposing the house to 60% of the buyers that are out there. Which, if you've got 90% of all buyers looking at a house, 90% of all buyers aren't interested in 90% of the houses on the market. Does that make sense? You only want the 60% that are interested in the house that you're selling to look at it. And that's where that sweet spot is. Time is the enemy of price when it comes to listings. If you've been in a market that has broker metrics before, broker metrics it tracks pricing, adjustment, it tracks everything that goes on in the market. But one of the best things that broker metrics provides insight into is when a property goes on the market, and we can't do this through our MLS or not a way I found. If we found a way, this would be magic. It would be magic sellers. But it shows a house that's priced properly and the amount it nets at the end of the day versus a house that's priced improperly to begin with, goes through price adjustments, and they end up netting less money across the board. If you have to make adjustments, you net less money, period. And I so wish we had broker metrics, and I'm going to continue to push to get that because I think we need that in our market, just to help us with that. And I would look for a source of that data that may be outside of there. Maybe NAR has some statistics on that we can look up. But it's huge to price right at the beginning and not have to make those adjustments. So, price to reflect market movement. Do you know what what does that mean to everybody? Price to reflect market movement. They talk about it a lot in the book Shift. When markets are shifting, the market is either prices are trending up or they're trending down. So what you've got to do is you've got to price just a tad bit ahead of the market. Because if you price on the market, you're either going to be chasing it down in a downward market. And if you're in an upward market, you want to price ahead of the market. So just a little bit. So at that 4 to 6 weeks on market, you get that offer and you get it done. If you go in on a downward market and you price that house right where it is that day, and when we're talking about rapidly shifting markets, and then the house is losing value at, let's say, 2% a month, in markets that shift 12% in a year. Is that right? 24% a year, that would be way too much. 1% a month. Whatever the math is, wherever the market said, let's use 12% in a year shift in value. And some markets, Las Vegas and Florida, were experiencing way more than that in the downturn. But if you priced where the market was, and a market shifting 12%, then next month your house is already worth 1% less than what you put in the market. So you'll continually be chasing the market down. So it's important to be just a hair ahead of the downward, chasing the market. So it says, if the market is declining, time is definitely the enemy of price. This is also an art, the art of persuasion. Choosing the right comparable properties is a big step in the right direction, but there's much more to it. Your job as listing agent is to persuade your sellers to know the right price impacts the marketability and stability of their home. Marketability and stability will also be determined by the following: market direction, whether market prices are moving up or down, and the speed of change, how quickly they are changing, and the rate that change is. Tony DeCello, Coach's Corner down here at the bottom, has a graph that illustrates that. So this month, the best price is today, and it's critical that in a downward market that your sellers know that you've got the price right today, because next month they're going to get less, and the month after that they're going to get less. Not to mention that they're making mortgage payments many times on top of that. So if you compound the two, then it's in their best interest to price 30 days ahead of the market and go ahead and sell, rather than chase that market down. Does that make sense? So, yeah, so number 5 says don't chase the market. And there's a graph that shows that as well. Price the seller wants, price correction, and then the dotted hyphenated graph that goes down shows what the market is actually doing in the time market. So you end up chasing the market down, and you never get where you need to go. And they've been paying mortgage payments all this time and losing value over time. So it's in their best interest to price 30 days ahead of the market and go ahead and get what a buyer wants in that declining market. So in a rising market, the opposite is true. Sellers who feel time is on their side may price above the current market and hope the market will catch up and bring them the price they want, provided the market conditions continue to rise. Sellers who want to cash in on improving prices in rising markets are still well advised to price at the market to get a sale now and move on with their lives. And that's important for 2 reasons. Most of the times, again, they're continuing to pay mortgage payments. So if they go ahead and sell now, that may save them 2 months of mortgage payments, which may be better than what the amount that they realize by waiting the time in the market out to get longer. 6, don't be afraid to be brutally honest. The truth, you do not make the market. Your job is to show sellers how to get their home sold in the market. And this is, believe it or not, what they expect. Pricing right is hard work, and it's not for the faint of heart, but it's worth it because it gets your sellers to their goals and you make money for your business. Brutal honesty is how Shipp describes your best approach. Be considerate, but do not mince words about the market, and price the property to reflect the market. Pricing right means telling the truth about what can be tough topics: market conditions, property condition, features, amenities, and location, buyer and agent feedback, and comparable property sales. Here's a short script to address pricing honestly. Do you want me to tell you the truth, or do you want me to tell you what you want to hear? It's pretty powerful. And you may think, it may feel a little bit uncomfortable to you, but it's not. We are the professionals. It is our job to understand the market and to advise our sellers on their best move going forward. I mean, that's what they hire us to do. And I'm of the opinion that if you are not brutally honest with your sellers, that you're not acting in their best interest. I feel like you're not acting in your seller's best interest if you know that they want a price that's too much for their property and you choose to list it anyway. I believe you're setting up false expectations at that point. And I think that part is just critical. Don't be afraid to say what the market is going to be.
Well, in the long run, they're gonna thank you, because if you, I mean, you try to play nice, and nice is only good if it actually gets their house sold.
Mm-hmm.
They'd much rather you tell them the truth and get it sold than to be nice to them and it's on the market.
Right. Absolutely. If you have one that just doesn't want to budge, then what would be a way to make that win? An opportunity. I mean, you get them that just do not want to budge at all. I would think that you could possibly present this to the seller. Let's say you're $10,000 apart. The seller was listed at $160, you want to list at $150. You say, okay, I'm telling you what I think the market's going to dictate. I think your house is priced at $150. You want to go on the market at $160. Here's what I would be willing to do. We'll put your house on the market at $160. Based on the graph I showed you, we're going to get our offers between week 4 and 6. That's if we were priced at $150 to begin with. And if we weren't getting the activity at $150, then we would need to position ourselves more competitively at that point, at any rate. So I'll be willing to take your listing at $160 if we haven't had 3 showings in the first 3 weeks. Then I want a provision in this contract that says we're going to make a price adjustment down to $148.
And you make them sign it, and
Sign it, and you have it as an additional provision in the contract. And so, and then because they're not listening to you, you've already told them, I'm telling you the truth, not what you want to hear. Now, I would be willing to take your listing at your suggested price. That way, we can see if the market will bear that price. Because again, I don't dictate the price. You don't. The market does. Let's see what the market tells us. If we haven't had that amount of activity, then when we make the adjustment to 148, I would be willing to take the listing. That's how hard I believe in what I'm telling you the price should be. And then they say no, and you say, well, I'm sorry, I don't feel like I can sell your house at 160. And I don't want to do you. I don't want you not to achieve your goal. And again, I do this. This is my job. This is how I feed my family. It's not a hobby for me. So I'm going to take listings that I know I can sell. And you can say that. You're just being honest. And then if somebody else goes in behind you at 160 and they don't sell it, the seller's going to come back to you when it expires. They're going to say, well, I wish I listened to you to start with. You're going to say, great, let's put it on the market where we can sell it. And we'll sell it. What do you think about that? Is that too?
Yeah, no, I use like a state of the market report that you can do on a computer, but of course I understand that you end up at the bottom with, in this past year, there were 30 houses that sold. Presently, there's 35 houses on the market.
Mm-hmm.
That means however many days that turns into on the market.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just use an illustration. You go to the supermarket and you get your little stuff, just a couple of items, and you're ready to get out of there. And you go up to the front when it's checkout is, and there's a line with 7 people in it.
Mm-hmm.
But you look to the right, there's a line with only 1 person in it with a small bit to bring out. Which line do you want to be in at the grocery store?
Mm-hmm. It's a small line.
That's the line you're going to be in if we ever price your house. The big line is where you see. And it's all written down and they can see.
That's
I like
great.
that analogy. I really do like that analogy. That was good.
Look, everybody can relate to that, even me, especially me.
That's great. That's excellent. Very good. So on page 16, let's review real quickly. We're not going to do it with the partner. We'll just do it open in class. What are the 4 factors that drive price?
Location, neighborhood,
Size.
size.
Yeah, that's right. What sales?
Right price, the market, market.
At the end of the day, houses never price properly. And in good condition. Price properly can overcome conditions, so I've just limited the price properly. What the seller can and can't control.
Their position.
Absolutely. They can't control their position in the market. They can't control what the market will bear for their property. What's the window of opportunity?
That person.
Well, that person, 3 weeks,
30 days.
Most offers come in week 4 through 6. And most of your activity should be week 1 through 3. And that is a script that I've found to be most effective in my listing presentation. That I say, look, here's what I think your house is going to bear in this market. However, neither one of us, have a crystal ball. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the first 3 weeks of activity. If we have a lot of activity, we know we're priced right. Hopefully, we get an offer week 4 through 6. If we don't have activity, then we know that we need to do something to get the activity. So we either need to review your condition or we need to review your price, but the market is going to tell us a story and it's important that we listen to it. If we have a lot of activity and no offer week 4 through 6, there again, there's something that's keeping people, and it's obviously not the price. So at that point, it's probably something we need to do condition or staging wise to get your house more presentable. Make sure it's the market, like Helen said. It's those people out there. It's the market. It's always the market. Yeah, those old buyers out there. So the pricing strategy checklist. Use this checklist working on a property, whether it's a previewed property for practice, property plan to list. It will help you learn the disciplines you need to internalize. Great page to cut out the even dotted lines for you there. 6 pricing strategies. Know what sells. Always evaluate both competitive price and marketable condition. Know what the sellers can and can't control. That's very important. Just to internalize that at all times. I would just internalize that one. Understand the window of opportunity. And that window of opportunity, that graph is perfect. That's like on average. In a slower market, that window may change a little bit. It may be week 1 through 5 that you have a lot of activity, and offers come week 5 through 7. A lot of that's going to depend on your average days on the market. So that that can adjust one way or the other. I would suggest keeping it just like it is though, because most sellers want their house sold how fast.
Yesterday?
Yeah, exactly.
Did you bring a buyer with you?
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. Thought you had one in the car, so you pulled up.
Yeah.
Price to reflect the market movement, critical and shifting markets. Price ahead of the market, again, critical and shifting markets. And don't be afraid to be brutally honest. Do you want me to tell you what you want to hear, or do you want to hear the truth? Okay, CMA. The truth on CMAs. In addition to price, what makes a property comparable to another falls in 4 main categories: location, size, amenities, and condition. Then you must factor in when a property sold, when it became pending sale, and active listings. Tip for that is comparable properties will be more or less easy to find depending on overall supply. When comparables are in short supply, you may have the challenge of extending your search area or modifying other criteria to get a better handle on the price. 07, you could do a CMA in 10 seconds. You could pull 10 comparable properties in any area, anywhere. It was just incredible. We're not quite that fortunate anymore, but the market is picking back up, and there are some good comps out there in most areas. What a CMA is. You've seen that pricing property is both science and art. The science of it happens in the CMA, a comparison of property to other similar properties. What a CMA is broken down into 4 things. It's a search the MLS for properties that correspond to the property with pricing using the 4 main criteria. Again, location, size, amenities, and condition. Select a small number of recently sold properties pending sale that you believe represent the closest comparisons to your seller's property, and the number of comparables available will be impacted by market conditions. So you want to do recently sold properties. Why?
That's a big sale.
Yeah, that's a clear indicator of what the market is bearing at the time.
What the buyers are buying.
Right. Pending sale.
That's good. It's a chance to get close.
There's offers on it.
There's offers on it, so it shows a price that obviously brought an offer.
And the number of days on the market at that point, when that pending sale comes up, the number of days on the market is extremely important
Yes.
to
Absolutely.
emphasize.
And then you want to look at actives as well, because you are entering a competition. I think the idea is to make sure that you find properties that are the most like the one you're selling. If you can find some that are just dead similar, then it eliminates a lot of discussion. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So decide on a price to recommend to your seller that takes into account the comparables and your seller's motivation and goals. Display the most relevant data in a simple, readable format for your seller so you can review with them why you've chosen the price you're recommending. What is a CMA physically? It could be pages in a binder. It could be a flip book. It could be a series of presentation screens on your laptop or tab. These pages and screens are designed to help you walk the seller through the comparative process you went through to arrive at your recommended listing price. So again, there is no one correct CMA format. It's whatever you find helps you present to the seller how you determine what you believe the market's going to bring for their house. And I would add to that, I think it's very important that it lets them make the decision. You want to recommend the price, yes, but if you can get them to conclude that price on their own, then you won half the battle. Then you having to say, you know, I think you should go on for this. Help them make that decision. There's several ways to go about that. So what you show can include a larger sample of possible comparables, which happens to be my preferred method. If there's enough out there, I like to take 5 solds, 5 actives, and whatever's pending. That's what I like to take. And then I like to lay them out in front of them. Say, here's what's sold recently. This one is similar to your house because of X, X, and X. This one, and this one, and this one. These are pendings that are very similar to your house. And these are the ones that are active on the market. Now, based on these 5 that are active on the market in your neighborhood, where do you want to be priced in this window of these 5 properties? From 132 to 139. More times than not, they're going to look at all that and they're going to go, I'd be crazy if I didn't want to be around 132. And I go, you know, that's right. I think that's what we should do. You know, or very close to there. Somebody that looks at one that comes in your neighborhood, they're going to look at 132 through 135. They may not look at 139 because it's priced too. It's, you know, it's the highest one in the market. They're going to look at the first 3, but they're not going to drive to your neighborhood and probably look at one house if the others are similar. I find that works best for me.
Sounds good. Really good. That's good. Yeah, I like it.
Because then they arrive at it themselves.
Yeah, that's what I found is easiest for me. I do present, I've got an example of the CMA I present to more S&C types. But I find some people, when you put a real complex CMA in front of you, you spend 30 minutes answering questions of how you came to a value rather than just letting them decide based on what because the other thing is the consumers are going to be looking at if you take 5 pendings and 5 sold, 5 active, and whatever's pending, that's the same thing that the buyers are going to be looking at when they're evaluating what homes to look at. It's also what buyer agents are going to be looking at. So it really just brings everybody together.
And this gives them a chance to ask questions that are in their mind without you telling them all that stuff.
That's right. That's
You
right.
got to listen more than you talk.
That's right. Absolutely. It could also be a narrowed down version of that list, helping you explain how you choose the final set of most relevant comparables to price with. It can be detailed pages from the MLS for the final set of comparables to help you talk through why you valued specific features of the seller's home as you did. And it could be a summary page with your recommended list price, the total price, and as a price per square foot shown alongside the current competing listing addresses and their list prices. So leverage eEdge on the right, we talked a little bit about that. Most of the graphics used in this power session appear in the eEdge listing consultation guide. Be sure to go through it and become familiar with every page. It has been created to help you build your own listing consultation template, one you will modify as your pricing and presentation skills develop. That's very important, I believe, to take that and make it in a format where you can use it as a presentation. It is a listing presentation. It's not something you slide across the table and go, here, I want you to look at that when you get an opportunity. The idea is that you take that, you walk through page by page, and you say, okay, this is, you know, my cover letter that promises what I'm going to do for you. These are the 14 ways we market your property. Here's the importance of pricing your property correctly to begin with. Here's a graph that illustrates, you know, another reason. Whatever, you know what I'm saying. Here's a graphic of why pricing your property. Here's your window of opportunity. The next graphic, and then here's some testimonials from my people. Now let's talk about your comparables and where we think we should price your property. So it should be something that you guide. It's like a guide. So you internalize what you're going to do every time when you sit down at the table, and you're not winging it each time. Does that make sense? You go in there with a format that you can follow easily. You always have it ready, because that format probably won't change much. You may change it a couple times a year. Some people may change it every day. But you're not going to add new, fresh testimonials to it or something. But it can be a format that's pretty much just a solid format that you follow each time that just keeps you consistent. So when you sit down, you walk in, you know what you're going to talk about, you know when the objections come up, and it helps you control the conversation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. It really is a great presentation, especially if you know it looks very professional, and you can modify it as you want. So, positioning your expertise. Scripts are hugely important when you're presenting your CMA, and here's a great one to position your expertise. If you went to a doctor and the doctor told you you had a terrible disease, would you want to be told the truth, or would you rather be told, go home and enjoy? Of course you would want to be told what you had and what to do to get better. Well, I'm the professional, like a doctor, and I'm telling you the market shows we need to price it right. Otherwise, you're going to have a terrible disease called no showings. And when you have no showings in a market that is going down every month, you are losing money daily. You do want the most money, don't you?
I do.
The next page is a script for explaining the CMA. Somebody else read that on 15 to 20.
What did you say?
Page 20. Explaining CMA.
Okay. Mr. Ms. Seller, would you like to obtain the highest price possible for your property?
Of course.
Well, to achieve the highest price possible, you must have maximum exposure to the marketplace or to the buyers that are out there shopping. The most important decision you will make in this respect is where you decide to price the property, your property. The way most sellers establish their listing price is with a comparative market analysis, what we call a CMA. Then you take out your CMA pages. As you can see from the CMA, the average market time in our area is 60 days. This means that if you want to sell your property in less than 60 days, you have to be in the top 50% in terms of price and property conditions. To sell in 30 days now, you'll have to be in the top 10 to 15% in terms of your price and property condition. And right now would be a good place to ask, to sell your home in 30 days, where do you think you need to be? Would that be a good question?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You will need to find out the correct numbers for, well, let's get that one. This graphic then shows a triangle graphic, shows the percentage of buyers who will see your house based on whether your home is priced at fair market value, below market value, or over market value. As you can see, if you price your home at fair market value, 60% of qualified buyers will see it. However, if you price it just 10% over market value, you cut that number in half, and only 30% of the qualified buyers will see it. That means that 70% of the buyers who are qualified in terms of criteria and price range will not see your home. Isn't that sad?
So they're telling you exactly how to present that graphic.
Right. Very good.
So you could internalize this script and then leave that graphic in your listing presentation, and you know when you get to that page, that's going to trigger this script. And then that helps them say, well, no, I want to list my house in 30 days. And you say, okay.
Let's do it.
Where does that tell you need to be? And then they'll give you the answer, and you say, perfect. Sign here. Let's go. Mr. and Ms. Seller, the most important decision you will make is where you will price your property. Pricing your home at fair market value will attract more buyers. Attracting more buyers normally results in a higher purchase price. Overpricing your home results in a longer market time and possibly a lower price. Would you like to price your property to sell quickly, or would you price your property where it can take longer to sell? The choice is yours. What would you like to do? Okay, here's the fun part. What do we get when we present a suggested price range and the seller thinks their house is worth more? What do you get? Objections. So, here are some great objection handlers. Page 22.
I know that version.
Yes. So anyway, these are some great scripts. We want to take these. These are some that you really, really want to focus on internalizing, because this is what you're going to run into as you present that CMA. And you need to have, you got to have your toolbox full. Plumber doesn't go on the job without a toolbox. Your toolbox is your scripts. You got to have them. You got to have some answer to these questions, because these are the questions that you're going to hear when you're on the listing presentation. It's going to happen. It's best to be prepared for it. So, objection number one. We need a certain amount from this sale in order to buy our next house. We've got to have the down payment. Somebody want to handle that objection for me?
Well, I mean, this is old school, but basically, you say, well, let's just see if you were the buyer. How would you feel if your house was priced at $150,000 and there was one very similar priced at $140,000 as a buyer, and the condition was the same? What would you do?
Mm-hmm.
Put yourself in the buyer's shoes.
Will you as a buyer pay what the seller wants because that's the price they need? No, you'll pay what it's worth, right?
Right.
Based on my example, that's what the buyers are going to do too.
Yes.
Can we price a little bit higher and come down later? Here's what frightens me about pricing higher. People who have seen many houses will find yours and think it's right, but they won't look at it because of the price. We don't want to drive buyers away. We want to attract buyers. We want them to make offers. Does that make sense? Option number two. The greatest number of showings comes from the first 3 weeks. If they see the house is overpriced, they walk away and we don't get them back. let's get one or more people to make an offer right away. If more than one likes your price, they might even compete and drive it higher. Wouldn't that be great? Objection number 3. How can we be sure the price you're recommending is the right price? I love this one. Anybody want to read this one for me? And make me do it.
Have you ever bought a stock? How do you know what it's worth? When you're selling stock, you check the market prices. You know what you pay for it, but the market doesn't care. Real estate is a commodity today. The market says what your home is worth. Why would a buyer reach into their pocket and pay more than the market says it's worth?
Well, they wouldn't.
They're not
They're
gonna.
not going to. The stock market analogy is one that works really, really well.
Yeah.
People understand that.
Yeah, especially if you've been in the market and lost money 2 or 3 times already.
Most people get that one. We were hoping to get more for our hunt. Do you understand the law of supply and demand? When supply is up and demand is down, which way do prices go? They go. Yeah. Yeah. What supply do we have now? Right. That's why prices have gone down. It's a law, not an idea. Do you defy the law of gravity? We can't defy this law either. Let's price it right and get it sold now.
That was a little flip to me. I don't know. That was a little bit like, that one, yeah, I feel that.
Because they don't know what's.
I mean, I think you
And
could
these are-
use
yeah,
that,
These are just some suggestions, and you can
Sure.
tailor it to fit the ideas that you have. These are the objections you're going to hear. The idea is to have a response for those works for you. And there's many places to go find scripts. You can go to KW Connect, and there's objection handlers that are laid out from top listing agents all across the country, and you can see exactly how they handle objections. And you can pick the one that feels comfortable for you, and then use that one. The idea though is to have a response, and to have a response that you don't have to think about. In other words, when they give you that objection, you want to know what your answer is.
It needs to be regular conversation.
Absolutely.
It doesn't need to come across that you have to hem and haw until it comes to you.
That's right. That's right. Because that makes you look like.
Sure.
Well, no, I mean, if it's a regular conversation, what does it look like? You're the expert. You're the professional. You have all the answers.
Yeah.
They're asking you questions, and you're answering them just like that. So you just take that right off the table.
Instead of selling like a robot.
That's
That's
right.
right.
That's
A
right.
robot, that's good.
You just take it right off the table. So price recommendations. Presenting your price recommendation is the end of the process. Show the sellers the following data pages that illustrate your conclusion. The longer list of recent listings and sales, listings sold, pending, and active. So use actual MLS printouts. So that's what I've given you today. There's an expired page that's 755 Ashley Meadows Drive. You're going to see 3. There's a stack of 3 properties. One has a history behind it, and then the other 2. These would be the comps that we would present, or these are the comps that I pulled to present to a seller. If I were going to meet the seller for 755 Ashley Meadows Drive, which expired, I don't remember the date it expired. I won't say it was, anyway. I don't remember the date it expired, but it expired. Anyway, it was priced at $144.5. And then you've got 3 here, which if it expires or part of your lead generation package, this would be a great way, to go and try and help educate this seller and help them understand what really the true market value of their house is. So you take a longer list of recent listings and sales. I don't have actives for it. But I did bring recent sales. In my estimation, recent sales are the biggest determining factor of the price of your house. house. Actives are important, but you could have 4 actives that are way overpriced. So you want to base all of your strategy, or most of your strategy, on recent sales, because that is transactions that have closed recently, they've passed an appraisal, they've gone through a loan process, everything's worked, they've closed.
And the actives just show them where they should be in the market.
That's right. That's right. So let's say that the one that's expired is an active, and it's at 144.5. And then you've got these that have sold at 132, 136, and 139.9 and 139. So I'm going to wrap all of this next section up just in looking at these comparables here that I've provided there. So if you look at 770 Addington Drive, it's got a history behind it. And if you look at the history there, you can see that it was on the market for a period of time, and it started at what I would consider to be overpriced. And apparently the market thought it was overpriced as well. So it stayed on the market for an extended period of time, and it went through adjustments, right? And when did they make the first adjustment?
June of last year.
June of last year. And they made an adjustment of $1,400. I'm going to tell you, in my estimation, if you're going to make a price adjustment, it's got to be impactful. And $1,400 is not going to make a bit of difference in a buyer's mind. So that just shows you that they chased the market, chased to get down to market value. Finally, probably had it about right at that 135.9 number, but that was after it had been exposed to the market for 90 days. So then what did it have? It had that stigma. What's wrong with that house? So it got withdrawn. It stayed off the market for about 60 days, came back on at 135, which is the correct price, and it sold in 12 days. Went under contract in 12 days.
Okay.
So there's a great example of what overpricing your house will do to you, because even when you get down to the correct price, after it's been exposed to the market that long, people have a perception that there's something wrong with the house. And they're either not going to look at it, or they're going to ask that question: what's wrong with this house? Why has it been on the market so long?
Or if they decide to go in the house, they're looking for all the problems that are there.
That's right. They're not there thinking about where to place furniture. They're thinking, why this house hasn't sold.
And then
That's a great point.
What offer can I make that's going to get, they've been on the market this long?
Yeah, there's something wrong with this house. I got to find out what it is. Yeah, it's a stigma. And then you look at the other two comparables that are on there. One listed at 136, and guess what?
sold.
Sold at 136. And what do you see similar about the two houses?
It looks like
They're the exact
brand.
same house.
Yeah. Yeah,
The seller that started way overpriced ended up selling at what?
less.
132. The one that priced it right got 136. And sold it in 24 days. And paid less in closing costs. So this seller ended up netting about 128, and this seller ended up netting 134 because they priced it right to start.
And remember, what would you say the first one had?
128.
All right, minus house payments, taxes, and insurance for, what, 6 months?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So take that off.
yeah, that's right.
Lost it.
And look at the other example. They put it on the market at 139.9. They sold it at 139, and they sold it in 26 days.
Yeah.
They ended up netting 136 by pricing it right to start with. Now, if you're sitting down talking to the owner of 755 Ashley Meadows Drive, and you go in prepared with this information, and you ask them the question, so based on these three comparables and the history of that first one we just went through, where do you think we need to price your house in order to get it sold in the next 60 days? To have the best chance of getting it sold in the next 60 days. And I would be shocked if somebody told you more than about 135.
Right.
And if they said more than 135, I would say, look, I think honestly, if you want me to tell you what I honestly believe, we need to have your house price at 135 and keep it sell it quickly in this market.
What are your tips on finding comps?
Well, first, my tips on finding comps are you want to find location. This is where it gets a little bit subjective.
That's why I asked it.
Yeah. I would say if you're in Ashley Meadows, I would pull comps that are in Ashley Meadows. And here's another importance of being really in tune with your market. If you couldn't find comps in Ashley Meadows, where is a comparable neighborhood you could go to that would find homes that are similar to Ashley Meadows that a buyer would look at both? So if I were doing Ashley Meadows and there was an insufficient amount of comps, I might would travel over to Charleston Village.
Or Winterfield, they're a little older, but not much. Winterfield and, what's the other one? Winterfield, something on the other side of it.
Mm-hmm.
They're
So,
similar.
yeah, I would look for a neighborhood with very similar features, built around the same time, same size homes, and I would try and pull comps from that area. That would be what I would do. Now, if I were looking at a house in, let's say, I don't know, Glendale,
Yeah.
College Court, you may have to reach a little further on those. And that's going to really depend. You're going to really be nailing down looking for. I like to use within 10 years of construction and then make adjustments if I need to in age. But if I can find something that's within 10 years and within about 500 square feet with a garage or no garage, then I can make adjustments from there, which you're going to find a lot in those older houses. But just try and keep it within 10 years and within 500 square feet is what I try to do. And then make sure you're not comparing a house with in a location that's had historically lower values than one that's had higher values, because that's where location plays a big factor. You want to have a comparable, similar location.
And that was one thing I was going to mention about Ashley Meadows.
Mm-hmm.
If you had two Ashley Meadows and one Winterfield, as an example, you can see that the houses in your neighborhood are these prices.
Mm-hmm.
But right next door, you got another neighborhood, the same price.
That's right.
So you want to have people looking in both of those neighborhoods for sure.
Right.
That's a lot of houses.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So most of the time, I try to pick one that's similar.
Yeah.
Outside of one.
Yeah, the idea is to keep your features as similar as possible. And if you have to reach out a little bit further, just make sure that where you're reaching to has similar historical trends, if you will.
That's a good point.
Yeah. I mean, because you could have the exact same floor plan that draws a different amount of money based on location. Look at what's the place over behind Bedford that's just like Ashley Meadows. Same floor plans and everything, same building. Is it Ashcroft Village? Anyway, quarter pad. So those houses bring a little bit more money than the ones in Charleston Village, although they're the same house. They're the exact same features, but they bring a little bit more money because of the location. So you have to be careful of taking that into account too.
Do you have an appraiser that you know well enough that you can talk to about houses?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't. That's very powerful. Somebody who's looking at what they are.
Yeah.
Who can tell you that, well, just down the street you can buy. Your competition is Bill Clark, who's building whatever.
Right.
Larger house.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question about this sheet that you did?
Yes.
Where did you get this from? Is that in the somewhere?
That is an Excel spreadsheet that I use. If I have somebody that likes a little more detail, then I'll put that together really quick if I need to. Or if I'm one of those properties like a Tuckahoe or Tucker Estates where everybody build a custom house, and one may have a garage, one may have a carport, and I need to subtract for a garage or subtract for a carport, or if I can't find, if I'm in a neighborhood that has a lot of 3 bedrooms, and some of those houses built in the 40s, you know, some of them may have 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and I need to make adjustments for that, then I'll use this sheet and make adjustments. But I generally, and for the most part, trying to avoid adjustments at all costs, because then you get into explaining why you adjusted for this and why you adjusted for that. And there's parameters that you can use for that. I don't like that. It's personal opinion. Some people would rather go through that process and, you know, take out a garage or add for a bedroom or add for half a bathroom or adjust for square feet and this, that, and the other, which I certainly know how to do. I just choose not to take that approach in most cases. And a lot of that depends on who I'm talking to. There's some sellers that want that approach.
This is similar to the quick CMA in the MLS.
Yes.
And you can make adjustments right on there. For instance,
Right.
I always like to adjust if there's a garage, because in Ashland Meadows they had garages and they
Sure.
don't have garages.
Yes.
So that's but you can do it right there.
Right.
For
Exactly.
that.
Exactly.
And that does something.
Yes. And if I were comparing garages and not garages, then I would probably employ that sheet as well.
Yeah, I don't think so.
So I would take these, and I would lay them out,
Uh-huh.
and then I would have that beside it, and I would say, here's where they're similar, and here's where I've made adjustments where they're not similar.
Yeah.
So you don't get too wrapped up in having, the thing that I find distracting is when you have a list of all the things that can be adjusted,
Mhm.
however you don't make adjustments for them, then that's where all the questions come in. Well, why didn't you adjust for this? Why didn't you adjust for that? Whereas if I use that format, I can quickly add in whatever adjustments I make. If it's a garage, I can put it. If I have a property that's pretty unusual, it's on an acre and a half, and I need to adjust out an acre, then I can use that sheet. I can type in acre adjusted out, and then that's the only thing I presented that I adjusted. Does that make sense?
Keep the adjustments simple
Simple, yes.
and few.
You know, like this nice when you just close the cost.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
they have to-
I like to put closing costs in there because if you look at this one, what I do is a lot of people get tied up in square feet as well.
Yeah.
So at the bottom, I have just a plain square foot analysis there. It shows the average square foot of all the properties. And then if you take the square feet and you multiply it by that average, then you've got a price of $137,311. And up top, if you adjust everything out, you're at $132,737. So they're fairly close to each other. So $135 would be a good price.
Yeah.
You don't want that house. And that's the two different approaches to look at it. And it's just a summary of it.
That clock's wrong, by the way.
Okay. Okay.
Can I ask you,
Yes.
when you do a CMA, when you do a presentation, do you do a 1-step or 2-step? Do you go in and meet with people and walk through the house and then do your numbers, or do you go in with this?
It depends on how I got the person.
That's a great answer, because when I get a referral,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you're pretty confident you're going to get the deal.
Mm-hmm.
I go in and make friends,
Mm-hmm.
build that relationship. And I'll give you, this was so perfect example of what I'm talking about. I got a referral, and it's the woman, the agent's mother who lives here. And so I went to see the lady, and the minute I walked in her house, it looked just like my house as far as colors. And we just started a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I never once said anything about the price of your house, or anything about Keller Williams or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I stayed an hour and a half
Mm-hmm.
because it was fun first.
Mm-hmm.
Her daughter called her, and she called her daughter and told her that I had been. And her daughter said, "Well, did she sell herself to you?" She said, "No. She just came in and sat down in the chair, and we had a conversation, and I got a new friend."
Mm-hmm.
Now, is she going to get at this in somebody else? But you still got to do work. I don't mean you don't have to do work. But that's good. You gotta make friends, you got to build that relationship too.
I agree.
But you can do it quicker than that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how I run through it. Typically, I'll take a pre-listing package, especially if it's a wholesale item.
Yeah.
You're not gonna walk in and try to sell it on the first minute. If it's somebody that's called me and said, hey, I'm interested in listing my house, then I'm going to everything, I'm gonna try to close them at that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
That was excellent, Alan. You did a really good job.
Well, thank you.
Very much. I mean, a whole lot of things back to my memory.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And pick up some.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.